Welcome to this tutorial on how to use a DSLR on complete manual mode. In this video, we will be talking about how to alter settings in manual mode on your DSLR so that you can get the best quality image for whatever type of photography you have in mind. Today, I will be demonstrating how to change the settings of a Nikon D3300 DSLR, along with showing you some sample images that I have taken while using its manual mode, each of which demonstrate the functions that the settings are capable of. Even as an amateur photographer, I find that having complete control over my camera is the best way to take high quality photos, and it's really simple once you get the hang of it. Before we get started, you will need a camera of your own and an object or subject for the picture. Manual mode controls three distinct settings, which can be changed independently from each other to alter the amount of light that will eventually reach the sensor and form an image. They are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Changing the shutter speed. Shutter speed is the control of how long the shutter of the camera stays open, allowing a specific duration of light onto the sensor. It is changed by simply rotating the scroll wheel to the left or right. The scroll wheel is found on the top back right portion of the camera. Having a large number in the denominator of the fraction shown on the display screen will give a shorter shutter speed, therefore decreasing the time it is open. This will cause less light to come in as well as increased clarity of photos of fast-moving objects. The opposite is true of slowing down the shutter speed. The camera will allow a longer period of time that the light can enter to the sensor so that the image will be brighter, but also fast-moving objects can become blurry as a result. Changing aperture. Aperture is the size of the opening of the lens, which also determines the amount of light which reaches the sensor. The smaller the f-stop number, the larger the opening will be once the shutter is released while taking a picture. Opening the aperture will also create a smaller depth of field in the resulting image, as well as increasing the brightness, just like making the shutter speed longer. To change the aperture, hold the plus-minus button while turning the scroll wheel. These next two images demonstrate the change in aperture and depth of field. The one on the left shows a wide open aperture, or a small f-stop number, with a very shallow depth of field, while the one on the right shows the large f-stop and small aperture, giving a very large depth of field. Changing ISO. ISO, or the sensitivity of the sensor, is a setting which controls how well the sensor responds. To change the ISO, hold the FN button, or function button, on the lower left of the body of the camera, and scroll the wheel just like when we change the aperture. Shooting in normal light conditions, it is best to keep the ISO low to avoid graininess in the photo. If you are shooting in low light, you may need to raise the ISO to accommodate for the little light that you have entering the sensor. Here we have images showing the light compensation effect of ISO on an image. As the ISO gets larger, the image will become brighter and brighter, but also grainy, so be careful. Tips. Remember, when using manual mode, it is all about light. How long you want the sensor to be exposed to light, how much light gets through, as well as how sensitive the camera is to that light. If you increase one setting, you will need to decrease another to maintain a particular exposure level. Take an image of a coin, for instance. Although not the best picture, it is exposed well enough to see the image. Now, if I change the aperture from f1.8 to f6.3, look what happens. It gets really underexposed because the aperture setting cut off the amount of light allowed into the camera. To compensate for this, I made the shutter speed much slower so that more light comes in and brings the exposure back to the original level. Learning how to use a camera on manual mode is a very useful tool for a photographer. Not only are you taking a step towards becoming a seasoned photographer, your image quality will really take a step forward, both in clarity and exposure. Remember, practice makes perfect, and the more you use your camera on manual mode, the more it will come as second nature. For more on settings for specific types of photography, check out my written instructions on how to operate a DSLR. Thanks.